Ladies and gentlemen, our final speaker this afternoon has the last word for good reason. Great leaders like James Earl Rudder inspire others to action and accomplishment. I believe it is safe to say that the next speaker was inspired deeply by Earl Rudder's leadership and his service to his country. We are certainly inspired by his generosity and his decision to underwrite the cost of the installation of this bronze, soon to be unveiled. Regent Tony Buzbee is an attorney in private practice and founder of the Buzbee Law Firm in Houston. Mr. Buzbee is a proud graduate of Texas A&M University and a decorated member of the Corps of Cadets. He served in the United States Marine Corps and deployed to the Persian Gulf and Somalia, earning the rank of captain. As a member of the Board of Regents, he works diligently to assure sound financial and capital planning with system members, and he has a willingness to ask penetrating questions. Ladies and gentlemen, Regent Anthony Buzbee.
This is for you guys. First off, welcome. When Dr. D had this idea 2 or 3 years ago, I jumped on it because there's something about James Earl Rudder that's just so special to me. I was given some prepared remarks, but as is commonly the case, I'm going to veer from them. One of the things I read about Major General Rudder was one of his troops said he was one of the greatest men that ever lived. Now, as a former captain and a former lieutenant who was in the Persian Gulf, who was on a ship thinking we were going to have to assault an island, and had heard all the stories about Vietnam, and we didn't know who was going to come back or what to say to these young men, to have one of those young men say that about me, I mean, that's got to be Silver Star is great, but to have one of your privates say that about Lieutenant Colonel, that's a big deal. And that is the common sentiment about James Earl Rudder. He's a true great American hero, of course, and he has a significant connection. I don't want to lose the connection because he did great things at Texas A&M, but he did great things here. And I think he's still going to do even more great things because, as the way the doctor described it, walking down Rudder Way, looking at each of the core values, thinking about, do I measure up? I can see for many, many, many years to come, James Earl Rudder will be remembered. And sometimes I worry, because in our time, the way things are going in our country now, we're tearing down statues. It's really nice to be putting up a statue of somebody who really set the example in so many different ways. And not just as a war hero, but as a civilian hero. Because I can tell you there's people like Bill Mahomes who related a story to me earlier today that almost made me cry about his interaction with, I keep calling him Colonel Rudder because I'm stuck in 1944, but Major General Rudder. His interaction was just, it showed me the kind of character he had. We all know that he served as a football coach and an athletic director, and we all know that he was vice president and president of Texas A&M, and then later president or chancellor of the entire system. I have a personal connection to him, not only because of the example he set for me, but because my grandfather, who will never have a statue, who was one of the troops, who was a sergeant in the Army, landed also at Normandy, also on D-Day, and fought all the way to Berlin, through the Battle of the Bulge, through Liberation of Paris, Battle of the Bulge, and all the way to Berlin. And his entire life, he never said a word about it. And I've read that Major General Rudder never said a lot to your mom about that, never talked a lot about it. You had to learn about it from other people who talked about his heroics. The good news for you is people wrote books about your father, your grandfather. Nobody wrote a book about my grandfather. And so the only information I could gather was there happened to be a storage unit that my mother said, hey, there's a lot of German artifacts out there. And there's some rank insignia, and there's even several German weapons that he brought back. And so as I sifted through all that, I kind of put together, and I found his cruise book, which those of you that deployed, you know, cruise book basically talks about your entire deployment, where you started from, where you ended, that sort of thing. They had a cruise book. And he had kept a handwritten note of every city, starting from Southampton, England, to the shores of Normandy, through Katz, all the way to Belgium, to Berlin. He never said a word about it. His name was James Woodrow Cash. And although he was not, and would never call himself a hero, it makes me very proud to know that he was also a small part of what happened on those 4 or 5 faithful days. Now, I want you to look at this building, the highest point of this building. Now, I'm relying on somebody a lot smarter than me, but I'm told that's about 90 feet or so. Now, I want you to think about the feet of James Earl Rudder. Because if you've been to Pointe du Hoc, and if you've stood on the shores of Normandy, and you look down, those cliffs are almost that steep. And he came into them in the lead landing vehicle. Look, a colonel, lieutenant colonel, who's head of a provisional ranger battalion that made up the 2nd and the 5th, I believe, he could have chosen, in fact, I think his commanding officer was not so happy about him being in the lead vessel, but he knew he needed to be in the lead vessel. And he made some decisions when that vessel was going into land that probably saved the operation, because they were well off course, and he made decisions right on the spot, like, hey, we need to veer, we need to move further this way. All the while the Germans on top of those cliffs knew they were there and were raining down fire and hand grenades. Now, they didn't have a step ladder. They had grappling hooks and ladders they had to pile on top of each other to try to make it up those 100-foot cliffs. And the Germans weren't just running away. The Germans were doing everything they could to stop him. James Rudder was shot twice in that operation, shot through the calf, and was also some sort of device exploded and blew concrete into his chest, but he did not quit. He kept on. And when they finally were able to get to the top of the cliffs, the Germans didn't just quit. There were at least 2 or 3 counterattacks, and they were there for another 2 days fighting the Germans. And everyone that knew the operation knew that the taking out of those artillery emplacements that were overseeing and overlooking both Omaha Beach and the other landing beaches was essential to the success of the operation. And I think it's fitting, and it tells a lot about Major General James Earl Rudder that he was the man selected for that job. And he was the man that chose to be in the lead landing craft on that morning. I think bringing Rudder home to Tarleton was the right thing to do. I applaud you, President. I applaud you. I thank you. I thank you on behalf of the family. And I think it's good sometimes that we hold up and recognize people like James Earl Rudder. In Texas A&M in College Station, there's a statue of James Earl Rudder in a business suit. It's behind Rudder Tower. I used to walk, sometimes would walk behind Rudder Tower to avoid upperclassmen. It's a good, so you know what I'm talking about. And so you'd walk right by the statue. But in that statue, James Earl Rudder is dressed in a business suit because he had a very successful career after the military, of course. We've already heard about all the great things he did at Texas A&M University. But when we were talking about this statue, I think it was, everybody agreed it would be fitting to have him in his military uniform. And that's hopefully what we're going to see. I think our artists, I had a sneak peek, I'll just let you know, and I just think it's fabulous. And I know we're all going to appreciate it. The last quote. Those of us who were in the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M, we had to learn what was called campusology. So basically, every landmark on campus, you had to know something about it. You had to quote it to the letter. And if you didn't, guess what? You're going to be doing a lot of push-ups. So one of the quotes about James Earl Rudder, and I think it's absolutely fitting and absolutely true, he demonstrated an uncommon ability to inspire men and women and lead them to exceptional achievement. And I think he's still doing that from his grave. And I think that this statue and this Rudder Way will continue to do that. And I first off thank family. You've got to be so proud. I thank the Tarleton community, the Board of Regents, our Chancellor, and our Chairman for making this happen. And I'm really looking forward to us all seeing this statue. Thank you very much.